It's electric. Boogie, woogie, woogie.
Frustrated with your pain or injury? That sucks. But I'm here to help. Hi, my name is Denise and I'm a bodyworker and educator. Why is it so hard to find the care we need to feel better? Most of my clients have asked that question for years until we started working together. Now I'm going to help you find those answers. I'll explore different health disciplines and chat with talented practitioners. We'll share our insights and practical advice to help you get the results you need to feel good again. Because seeking the right care for your health can be a pain in the arse. But with me, your wellness journey will turn into a fun-filled adventure. Buckle up, baby, for the Passionate Health Advocate Show.
Welcome, listeners, and thanks for joining. I'm happy you're here. Today, we are going to a place that uses the electrical part of your brain to improve cognitive function and also help you feel better. Let's buckle up. Welcome to the land of neurotechnology. We are searching for Toby Pasman. He is a neurophysiology researcher and founder of Roscoe's Wetsuit's Neuro, an applied neuroscience company utilizing neurotechnology to help people improve brain health and reach peak cognitive performance. Is that you?
That is. Thanks so much for having me on the show today, Denise.
You're welcome. Well, thank you so much for reaching out to me and inviting us to this land.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a cool land to explore.
Yes. And that is exactly why we're here. I'm a big fan of neuroscience. And so I'm excited to learn more about neurotechnology. And I'm sure our listeners are just like, what the heck is this? And how can it help me? So would you like to tell us a bit about neurotechnology and exactly what that is?
Yeah. So neurotechnology definitely encompasses quite a lot, anything from some of the technologies I use all the way to, machine learning and AI and what Elon Musk is doing with trying to implant chips into people's brains and all that kind of crazy stuff. But basically the role I play kind of in neurotechnology is utilizing certain technologies such as QEEG brain mapping, which is basically an electrical study of a person's brain activity. So we can see and assess the different electrical frequencies that the brain operates on. So the brain runs both on chemicals along with electricity. The chemicals are kind of more talked about with, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. All those are really important, crucial neurotransmitters. But what's less talked about kind of in the popular media, I would say, is the electrical side of things. So that's where most of my focus is, because it's a lot easier to assess the electrical activity of a person's brain compared to the chemical side of things. So there's a technology called the EEG, which is short for an electroencephalogram, which is kind of a mouthful. So they just shorten it to EEG. And that technology is basically a swim cap looking device that goes on someone's head and is measuring the electrical activity that basically emanates from the brain up to the scalp. And we're able to record it at a bunch of different electrode sites all along that cap that's on someone's head. So that's sort of where we start out in terms of doing an assessment, so we can see, is a person producing healthy amounts of the different brain waves? Are they deficient in a certain brainwave? Are they producing too much of a certain brainwave? And it also tells us where exactly that deficiency or excess is actually occurring in the brain. So that's kind of the core assessment technology that I employ. And then based on that, we can sort of guide a person's brain into producing healthier electrical frequencies with technologies such as neurofeedback, neurostimulation, audiovisual entrainment, photobiomodulation, all ones that people may have heard of, may not have heard of. Neurofeedback is probably most well known out of all those, which is basically where you're playing sort of a video game with your mind. And I'll explain what I mean by that is you basically have one of these EEG caps on your head. So we're measuring the electrical activity of your brain, and then we're actually training your brain to produce more or less of a certain frequency. So for instance, if we're training your brain to produce more beta brain waves, which are really essential for focus, cognitive processing, kind of just energy, it's one of the fastest brain waves that we talk about. So say we're training someone to increase their beta wave production, you might see the screen get larger, or the audio tones, if it's audio feedback, the audio would get louder as your brain produces more beta brain waves. Now, if you start daydreaming and mind wandering, that usually sinks you into a slower alpha frequency. And then in that case, if we're still rewarding beta, you're going to hear the tones get quieter or the screen get smaller, hence sort of the negative feedback where we're telling your brain, nope, go back to what you were doing to increase the size of the screen or to get louder tones. So it's hence the feedback component. We're telling your brain exactly when it's doing a good job versus when it needs to alter its course a bit. So those are a couple of the main neurotechnologies I work with.
Very cool. Okay. That was a lot of information, but we're going to talk a little bit more about how you apply that with people, kind of like on a case by case basis. I'm like, oh, I have so many questions already. But before I dive into that, I know that you have a psychology background. So what made you go into the technology part versus just more of, the mental aspect, or even like you were talking about the chemical, if you're going to be a psychiatrist, prescribe like different chemicals to help. So what, as you went into psychology, because for me, it's like I have a minor in psychology years ago. And so it was such a different world. And so I'm curious what brought you to this path with all this technology with neuro.
So it really started with a biopsychology course that I took. Well, I was still a business major. I didn't know what I really wanted to do in undergraduate and started out studying business, but got quickly pretty bored and disillusioned with those hour and 50-minute lectures and realized I was not going to be able to do that for the next 4 years. So I ended up taking some different classes in different fields. And it was really this biopsychology class that was so fascinating to me, learning the biological basis of how the brain works on an electrical and chemical level. So with that interest from that class, one of the technologies that was discussed was the EEG, the electroencephalogram. And I found out that there were actually research labs at my university that utilized EEGs. So I became a research assistant in one of those labs and learned how to collect the data, artifact the data, which is basically where you're kind of selecting which is good brain data and which is kind of artifactual fake data. So I became really intrigued by what I was doing in that lab, but I thought it was super cool stuff. But I was like, we're assessing what the brain is doing with this EEG, with collecting this information, but it's like, are we able to actually do anything actionable to actually improve and alter the EEG? And that's when I found out about all of these neurotechnologies, such as neurofeedback or neurostimulation, that actually work to alter and improve the electrical activity of the brain. So that I kind of felt like was something unique and something that really drew me in, because you could actually see it in real time. As someone is getting an EEG done, you can actually see millisecond by millisecond what is going on with the electrical rhythms of their brain. Basically shows up as these little squiggly lines that is measuring the electrical waves that the brain produces. So I thought, it was just such a cool technology, and I wanted to figure out, is there a way, when we see abnormal or dysregulation in the EEG, is there a way that we can actually improve it? And what I ended up discovering as I started working at some places outside of college, that yes, there absolutely is. There are ways to enhance the EEG activity with these different neurotechnologies.
Oh, that's so cool. So, okay. So then you're like, okay, now I can actually apply this. So once you realize you can make this more of a tangible thing in the real world, what path are you going with that? How are you working with this to help people? Like, do you have a certain type of person that you're like, this is who I want to work with? Or, oh, I know I can help these issues with somebody. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So there's such a diverse array of applications with this technology. Like right after college, I started working at a peak performance facility outside of Seattle, where we trained the brains of a lot of like Hollywood actors, high level CEOs, pro athletes. So I got to witness all of that, which was super cool. But then the next job I took was actually at a substance abuse and mental health treatment facility in South Florida, utilizing the same neurotechnology to treat addictions, people coming off recreational drugs or alcohol, along with oftentimes comorbid mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, OCD, PTSD. So I saw kind of these same technologies being applied in vastly different spaces, and saw people in each of those spaces receive lots of benefits. The direction I chose to go with my own company now, with Roscoe's Wetsuit Neuro, is more so the peak performance and wellness space, because I'll just preface by saying I am not a licensed psychologist, meaning I can't claim to treat, that I'm using these technologies to treat a specific psychiatric or neurological condition, even though a lot of these technologies have very good clinical peer-reviewed research saying that they do help a lot of these different conditions. I just have to use certain terminology, like instead of, treating your depression, we're improving your mood, or instead of treating your anxiety, we're reducing your stress. So it becomes kind of just an issue of semantics. But yeah, I definitely gravitated a bit more towards, like, despite the fact that it's really interesting, utilizing this for kind of, mental health treatment and people struggling with addictions. I thought, there's so many applications for like the health and wellness industry, where, I think this technology can really benefit a lot of people, a lot of the same people that, go to high-end yoga studios and shop for organic foods and go to cryotherapy. People that really are paying attention to their physical health. I feel like, honestly, mental health or brain health is kind of the next frontier.
Yes. And thank you for sharing that, because, one, this is the reason why you're joining the show, is because a lot of listeners, fed up trying to figure out what to do. Obviously, we've been dealing with the pandemic, which is also putting mental strain on almost every single person. And so, people just want to help themselves and just not know how. And so this sounds like a really cool avenue to approach for wellness, because I'm all about wellness in every aspect of ourselves and our body and our health. And so I think people listening learn that it's not just one thing, it's a holistic approach. And so the fact that you're going into kind of the brain health, which would improve our mental health, that's super cool. So if somebody, say you're treating somebody, like anxiety is a big one. I know I myself have it. I read that you had it at one point, you were experimenting on yourself. So let's say if somebody that has anxiety were to see you, how would that work?
Yeah. So anxiety can, and all of these different mental health conditions can show up in a lot of different ways in each unique person's brain. So So that's why it's so important that we start with that QEEG brain mapping assessment, where we're taking a look at the electrical activity of your brain and then kind of pairing it with what you're reporting. So say anxiety, it can show up in different ways in different people's brains, but a common what we call a signature for anxiety is usually an excessive production of beta, of really fast, high frequency beta brain waves, specifically down the midline of the brain, in an area called the cingulate. So oftentimes when we see that with the brain mapping assessment, then we can use technologies such as neurofeedback, neurostimulation, or a couple other ones to basically quiet down those high frequency beta waves, help induce more of a really relaxed kind of parasympathetic response, where we're deactivating that fight or flight, where people are always on edge, thinking, worrying about things, and really, really boosting their parasympathetic nervous system, which tells you, everything is okay. I can rest, relax. Nothing is threatening my safety. And we oftentimes get stuck in our society today in that kind of chronic stress response, that kind of chronic fight or flight, where there's always something that is demanding our attention and so much stuff going on that we sort of get stuck in that state of anxiety. So with these technologies, we can really help train people's brains to start getting into those relaxed states, producing more slower brain waves such as alpha and theta, which is an even slower brain wave. And those really, really help to put people into kind of a deeply meditative, relaxed kind of trance-like state. And the more we do those sessions, because of the brain's neuroplasticity, its ability to change and rewire itself, the more we train the brain to be in that relaxed parasympathetic state, the better it becomes at doing so. So we can actually train people to their nervous system to be less reactive and less stressed and worry prone compared to what they were used to.
Yeah, that's okay. So that's very interesting. So it sounds like you take an electrical current to kind of alter. It's like, okay, there's too much stimulus or too much, as you were saying, the beta, correct? Mm-hmm. And so your approach to kind of help people tap into the parasympathetic system is taking electrical current to kind of balance that out. Is that correct? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah. So with, like, say, neurofeedback, we're not actually inputting any current to the brain. We're simply telling the brain how to best use its own resources. So it's telling the brain, good job, you're producing the desired electrical frequencies, or no, go back to producing whatever we're training you to do. Whereas neurostimulation is more so we actually are inputting something into the brain, which is the electrical current, passing that between different electrodes and stimulating those slower brain waves. So in the same way that, you could use training wheels, to help a kid start to ride a bike, and then they use those training wheels and then they're able to ride the bike on their own. That's sort of what I sort of compare to with neurostimulation, where it's sort of guiding the brain into these different states. So in these cases, into these more deeply relaxed, kind of a parasympathetic state. And then eventually, with enough repetition, with enough sessions, the brain becomes really good at producing those slower frequencies on its own, and doesn't have the need to necessarily continue to get more and more neurostimulation done. People can continue with it, but oftentimes people see really great improvements in their symptoms after 5 to 10 sessions.
Okay, because that was going to be my next question. So a lot of people, like with the work that I do a lot of, getting people into their parasympathetic system. I do manual therapy, but I also do a lot of breathing and movement, and all with neuroscience approach of calming the system down. And there's a lot of variations, modalities out there where a lot of the focus is tapping into the parasympathetic system. And again, each resonates with a different person. How would you compare what you're doing as far as, you said 5 to how many sessions people are able to go?
Yeah, 5 to 10, we start
Oh.
seeing really significant changes in the electrical data of a person's brain.
Okay. And so with people that are experiencing that, how does it feel to even go through a session? What does it even feel like?
Yeah, so neurostimulation, it kind of feels like, well, basically, after we've done the initial assessment, we'll put together a protocol that's designed to stimulate more of those desired brain waves that we're seeing maybe aren't produced in sufficient quantities in the brain map. So we place anywhere between 2 to 6 electrodes at various parts of the scalp, depending on which areas of the brain that we're working on stimulating. And then when we start up the stimulation, people usually feel kind of a mild tingling sensation. So sometimes people describe it as like an itch, or some people actually really enjoy it. They say it feels like a scalp massage. So people, it's a completely passive process. Neurofeedback, people have to actively be kind of playing this game and consciously be working to try to get those tones louder and the screen bigger. But with neurostimulation, it's a completely passive approach. So when I run sessions on people, they can be reading a book, they can fall asleep if they want to, they can watch a movie. It doesn't really matter. Their brain is getting the stimulation. And it's a very low intensity stimulation. So sometimes when I bring up neurostimulation, people's first thought is like ECT, the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the sort of shock therapy, right?
Right. And that's why I was asking, how was this? Yeah. I think probably a lot of people in the back of their mind are like, not sure.
No, they do. Like, when I do orientations talking about this technology, oftentimes before I even start, people joke like, "Are you going to shock my brain? Is this shock therapy?" And I'm like, no. This is it. Basically, it comes down to the difference being the dosage. So the commonality is that they're both using electricity to stimulate the brain, but shock therapy is using somewhere upwards of, I believe, like 500 to 600 milliamps of electricity. Whereas this low intensity neurostimulation I'm talking about, most of the research is done somewhere between 1.5 to 2 milliamps of electricity. That is kind of the sweet spot that researchers have found produces the most benefits with minimizing a lot of the side effects. So it's drastically different dosages of electricity that you're getting. And the goal here is not to shock the brain into kind of resetting itself. It's more so to entrain the brain, to gently entrain the brain to produce different quantities of these different electrical rhythms.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yes. Shocking the brain is kind of, doesn't really make sense if you want to go in that parasympathetic system. So that's not really going to work. But I get, like, when you describe it, I mean, it's like training a puppy, right? You're just gentle, get enough response or stimulus to kind of coax it along. At least that's kind of what I'm envisioning when you talk about your, the stimulation that you're providing.
Yeah. And the stimulation does a lot of really helpful things for the brain. So it'll increase blood flow to the brain, which improves oxygenation, nutrient delivery, also increases neurogenesis, which is the creation of new brain cells and new connections amongst those cells. So in addition to altering the electrical rhythms, you're also getting these added benefits of the better blood flow and oxygenation and neurogenesis going on. So it's kind of really working on the brain in a variety of different mechanisms.
Nice. Yeah. So it's like more added benefit than just retraining the brain to get out of anxiety. Very
exactly.
Cool. Nice. So, okay, when someone comes in, this is all in person. This technology is all in person, or is anything you do online?
With what I do, it's all in person. There are starting to be some remote neurofeedback done. But for the most part, people do need to come in person. Yeah.
Okay. And then if they come in person, how long is a session?
Yeah. So the initial, like say brain map, which is what we always start people out with just to get that assessment of what's going on, that usually will take up to an hour, just to get a couple good recordings and set someone up with the cap. And then actually doing a session that either is involving neurofeedback or neurostimulation usually runs somewhere between 20 to 40 minutes. That's kind of also a sweet spot where we want to give the brain enough of a workout where it is really pushed to start changing and improving its electrical rhythms, but we don't want to kind of overload the brain in the same way that, if you went to the gym for 3 hours and lifted super heavy weights, that, that could cause kind of more damage than it actually might benefit you. Kind of that overtraining. It's kind of a bit similar, I guess, with the brain, where you can make someone really exhausted if you do this sort of brain training for too long. So usually between 20 to 40 minutes is a good sweet spot.
Okay. That makes sense. Kind of like, building up, right? Building momentum, especially if the brain is not used to training that way, I would imagine, like anything else, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And people oftentimes will notice, significant, like after the first session, they'll feel significantly more relaxed, or they'll report that night. They'll have a great night of sleep, better than they've had in months or years. And that's showing that, the brain is already starting to make some of those changes, even though it usually takes several sessions to see real kind of long-term significant changes in the brain. From the very first session that we do, people oftentimes will notice something starting to happen.
Wow. I'm sure people out there, especially people that have dealt with like brain fog. I know when COVID hit and a lot of challenging times for people, that was kind of a symptom, or, the COVID fog, as once I called it. So I know people in general have that, but I think there's more with what's been happening in the world. So I'm sure imagining just like to be able to think clearly and to sleep better after one session would be really amazing for sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that's great about neurostimulation. And that's why it's kind of, in my eyes, kind of the technology that packs the most punch when it comes to training the brain, because neurofeedback, sometimes practitioners will, recommend a course of, 20, 30, 40, sometimes even 60 sessions, depending on what condition or ailment that you're wanting to treat. And if people have the patience and money and resources to put into doing that, great. But being able to actually see really immediate results, from the first session, and see real long lasting changes from, 5 to 10 sessions is, I think really draws people to neurostimulation.
Oh yeah, it's the Passionate Health Advocate Dance Break. Now get up and shake your thing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I know most people want an immediate fix, but that is not how life works, because we're human. We're not robots. But to have something that doesn't take so long, and to see, more long lasting. And when you say long lasting, what have you noticed after people have gone through treatments? How long are they benefiting from this change?
Yeah. So there's been lots of research conducted, and usually follow-up changes even after as long as a year. People's brain activity is usually pretty similar to what's recorded right after they finish the training. So barring any real significant, say you get hit in the head with a baseball the next day, or you're sleeping for 2 hours a night and eating tons of junk food and garbage, it's not going to work as well to sort of sustain those changes. This stuff is not a panacea for, your brain health, it's simply a tool in the toolkit. And some of those other tools being, nutrition, exercise, sleep, nootropics, smart drugs, all of these things play a role in impacting our cognition. So, if someone does this brain training and thinks, okay, I guess, my brain's good and I can just, do a bunch of other brain, not habits that are not brain healthy, then they might lose some of the benefits.
For sure. And thanks for saying that, because I'm like, that's like that with anything. So yeah, it's kind of like, why would you go and do this and then abuse it afterwards? I mean, we all have our vices and stuff like that, but it's just, yeah, setting the expectation that with this tool that you love and you're finding great results, why not support it with the, if you're going through that and you want to change, there's things to do, not just know that it's like a one trick pony. It works in conjunction with everything else that we're doing with ourselves.
Exactly. And that's why I usually implement like neurohealth coaching is one of the services that I offer to people. So we work with, improving their nutrition, helping people get a lot more good fats in their diet. Fats are such an essential component that is often neglected. But when it comes to the brain, the brain's actually made up mostly of fat. The myelin sheaths that insulate neurons are these fatty sheaths that require good fat to maintain functioning. So yeah, making sure that we integrate that stuff, helping people do certain exercise that's going to be really beneficial to their brain. All of this stuff, working with people to help them really get on this sort of brain healthy lifestyle. Often it's very synergistic, and it actually gets people better results while they're doing the brain training, doing neurofeedback or neurostimulation, because a lot of these other things can also increase neuroplasticity, increasing the brain's ability to change, reorganize itself, rewire itself. So if you can boost neuroplasticity, say by doing intermittent fasting or by doing sprint training, is a great way to boost neuroplasticity. And then you pair it with a technology like neurostimulation. I view that as like a great synergy. You're just stacking the cards, you're stacking the deck in your favor.
Nice. It's like the optimal way. It's like, it's not just getting this treatment, but then the support and the fact that, you're thinking about that and providing that for people, I think is great. Cause I think, a lot of people will try things or, like a new fad or, maybe it's not even like, we're not trying to do a new fad. It's like, there's new research found. So now we want to try something. And I think a lot of people will, go online and try it because they're trying to help themselves. But then understanding that there goes support with it. And maybe there's some information that they're not aware about. And it's like, how can they conduct this change with the right support? And I'm glad that you're providing that for people on that journey there. That's good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if people are aware of that. There's a lot of fat in the brain. When you talk about fats, because, people, I think there was one period in time where people just weren't eating any fats, like that was the gimmick for diet, which of course is ridiculous. So do you have certain types of food that you recommend just off the cuff?
Absolutely.
For people listening?
Yeah, I would definitely say all the focusing on good oils such as olive oil, coconut oil, eating, grass-fed butter, grass-fed meat. Those are all great fat sources. Avocados, that's another great brain healthy food. Dark chocolate. Chocolate provides some great fats as long as you're not getting all the sugar and milk fat that, sometimes come with it. So I definitely recommend like 80 to 90% dark chocolate. That's a great brain booster. So yeah, just eating.
I'm happy you said that because my partner is huge into avocados and I'm huge into dark chocolate. So we already are like, we're covered.
Covering your bases. There you go.
Covering our bases. Yeah, that's great. So I'm sure people listening like, oh, cool. I don't have to feel guilty about this. Of course, in moderation, but knowing that it's actually necessary for our diet, right? At least for our brain health diet, for sure.
Yeah. What you alluded to is like certainly how it was for decades, where it was kind of sugar or rather fats were demonized. So then we started seeing all of these kind of processed, cereals and bread and pasta became sort of the mainstays of our diet. But that was simply because of kind of faulty nutritional advice and certain money that was shifting hands that, that's a whole nother discussion, but yeah,
it is. We could probably go on about that, but yeah, we all know where you're going with that.
Fat was very unfairly demonized. And it's something that, we do know certain types of fat, like trans fat is terrible for you. It's banned in most products and stuff, but eating good, healthy, saturated fat is essential for your overall health, but specifically brain health. Another important thing about fat is that it provides a lot of cholesterol, which is another thing that's been oftentimes demonized, but cholesterol is actually the building block of all of your hormones. So producing healthy amounts of testosterone, estrogen, DHEA, pregnenolone, all of these they're actually neuroactive. They're called neuroactive steroids, meaning they influence brain activity. So if you're not eating enough good fat and getting all that cholesterol, you're not giving your brain the building blocks that it actually needs to sort of manufacture all of these hormones.
So glad you mentioned that too, because, we talk about water. Water is our body needs it, but not enough is talked about what does our brain need. And again, exercise also goes with that. And it sounds like you're also talking about it. So just understanding that it's what's to feed the engine, right? Get our brain going. So, after you're done with this episode, you don't want to go back and eat like a stick of butter, but it's just more of like, how do you apply that into your diet and know that all of these things exist to help us, just understanding the moderation, and we don't need to cut it out, right?
In terms of what you do need to cut out, though, I would say sugar is such a bad one for just, it's toxic to every cell in our body, but specifically brain cells do not like excess sugar. And so much so that even some researchers are starting to refer to Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes, because there's such a strong connection. There's such a strong connection between elevated glucose levels for prolonged periods of time and the neurodegenerative effects that we're seeing in Alzheimer's. So yeah, it's short term. It's causing oftentimes there's been studies about ADHD, cutting out sugar can drastically improve ADHD in kids. So there's the short term impacts, but then also long-term cumulative effects that occur from eating excessive amounts of sugar. So that's definitely the number one thing to cut out of your diet for sure, for better brain health, I would say.
Yeah. Or at least, lower it as much as possible. Yes. Going back to the whole body, that creates so much inflammation unnecessarily. So yes, but going back to your work, because this is super cool. Have you found any contraindications? Would there be somebody, let's say they're interested in working with you, but you're like, they might be dealing with a situation or a specific disorder. Is there anything where you're like, this is not appropriate for someone?
That's a great question. For neurostimulation specifically is the one technology they have to be a bit careful about if someone has a history of epilepsy, if they have a history of seizures, or if they have any heart conditions, because the heart also kind of runs on electricity. So doing this neurostimulation very rarely has caused sort of adverse effects in those couple populations. So if someone does have one of those conditions, then we might use a technology like Neurofeedback or say brain photobiomodulation, which is actually working on the mitochondria of the brain, boosting blood flow and mitochondrial activity by actually shining light either through the nose intranasally or transcranially through kind of through the head. So there's some different technologies that we might use instead of neurostimulation in those couple patient populations, I'd say. But overall, the technology neurostimulation has great safety. There's a meta-analysis done in 2019 that was looking at I believe it was like hundreds of studies using this type of neurostimulation, and they found very few to no, serious adverse events. So it is a very safe technology. But in those couple cases, then, just to be cautious, we might put someone on a different technology if they have a history of seizures or heart issues.
Okay. So that's good. So you have ways to adapt if there's, someone's dealing with some issues. You can still kind of work around and help them out, sounds like.
Exactly.
Great. Okay. Well, so for people listening or watching, what is a way that they can get a hold of you if they want more information or want to work with you?
Yeah. So you can DM me on Instagram at Roscoe's Wetsuit Neuro. You can go to our website, roscoeswetsuitneuro.com. And there's going to be a special landing page. People can go to roscoeswetsuitneuro.com/passionate health advocate. And there'll be a special promo code that people can find that'll get them 15% off their first neuro health coaching session if they choose to do so. There's also a complimentary 15-minute phone consultation that I offer just to inform people about what neuro health coaching consists of. And if people sign up for our newsletter on the website, roscoeswetsuitneuro.com, you can actually receive a free 6 steps to better cognitive performance PDF that'll give you 6 actionable things that you can do today that will actually start improving the health of your brain. So you can connect with me in those ways. And yeah, I would say that's the best way to go forward.
Great. And we're gonna go ahead and have all that information that you mentioned on the show notes. So for people that are only listening, you'll be able to find that on the show notes. And for people watching, you can also check in on the show notes for the audio. So Toby, thanks so much. And I have to ask you before we go, how did you come up with the name of your company?
Yeah, it's kind of obscure, right?
Yeah, I'm curious. Yeah. I'm like intrigued.
Yeah, so that was actually part of the thinking behind it. Was like, this is going to make for a good icebreaker. So,
of course, it's a closer for us.
For us, right. Yeah, everyone asks me. So yeah, nothing to do with surfing. I originally titled my podcast, it was just Roscoe's Wetsuit Podcast, and it was like people were all confused, like that this is a neuroscience show. They're like, they think it's surfing or something to do with that. But yeah, basically the name is a reference to, I don't know if you're familiar with the artist Childish Gambino. He's also the actor Donald Glover.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah. So I love him. He had an album called Because the Internet. And there was a screenplay that went along with the album. And in the screenplay, there's this theme of Roscoe's wetsuit. So the main character comes across the words Roscoe's wetsuit, just like graffitied under a bridge, just pops up in random places throughout the screenplay. And he's wondering, like, what does this mean? Eventually, at the end, he finds a kid who's scribbling Roscoe's wetsuit on a napkin, like in a cafe. So he approaches the kid. He's like, finally, I'm going to get to figure out what this means. And he asks the kid, what is Roscoe's wetsuit? And the kid's reply is, I don't know. I just saw it online.
Oh.
So
oh my God.
Roscoe's wetsuit, in essence, it means nothing, but it means everything, in the sense that it's sort of a metaphor, I feel like, for just a commentary on our culture of just kind of following trends and whatever we see online. And I guess the title is also somewhat ironic, since I hoped with my podcast and with my business to deviate from that sort of herd mentality of just following whatever is popular. So I don't know. I thought it was catchy and a little bit cryptic. So gets people thinking, and yeah.
I love it. I think that's awesome. I love it. It's like, right. Where are we going with this? Ironically, right. We're trying to, change the narrative, and we're using Instagram, and we're using podcasts, and we're using YouTube. So it's like, well, at least maybe we can be in a world where people are doing that, and maybe we can like open up the minds and really think, the whole point of this is to give information to treat people to think for themselves, what will work for themselves, listen to themselves. And that's the whole point of this show is taking this information, how does it apply to you? So, Roscoe's wetsuit. Love it. That's really cool. Yeah. So I'm so glad I asked.
Yeah. No, and that's a great way that you explained it for your show. And I feel like I should start using that, because it's like what I feel like what I'm doing with the podcast and with the neurotechnologies, like helping to increase people's cognition so that they can think for themselves and show up in the world in their best unique way and bring their unique gifts to the world. So I think it applies. It's such that philosophy, what you were just saying, is so applicable in the work that I do as well.
I agree. And this is why I have you on the show, because I think we all know that there's so many things out there. We're just trying to help people out. And I definitely relate to people, that expert guests, where they're just doing amazing stuff. People don't know about them. They don't know the great things that can evolve with your treatments. And just, you are thinking out of the box, but you're also putting your intention into, you believe in this service, this technology, this route, and a lot can come from it, So it's like getting that out there, getting that out to the world. And we're all just doing the best we can, and we're helping people along the way. And that's the hope. So the people that need to hear it or see this, hopefully they're watching and can get this information and work with you. That would be great. Once again, you're in Oregon, right? You said you're in Eugene.
I'm in Oregon for now, but the business, Roscoe's Wetsuit Neuro, is actually incorporated in Florida, and I'm moving all my operation to Miami. I'm going to be moving there in a couple months. So I will actually be servicing the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area for people who want to do these in-person services to get a brain map, look at the electrical activity of your brain, to do neurofeedback, neurostimulation. I will actually be doing either I'll come to your door or your office and actually set you up with this stuff, since I won't have a lab or center set up at first. So in the same way that you might hire a massage therapist, or they have, I don't know, all these IV vitamin vans in Miami, where I started getting the idea where it's like, people that are too hungover to get out of bed, you just call up one of these vans and they come into your place. They set you up with all your, from the comfort of your own home. So I was like, why? Maybe that would work with doing this sort of applied neurotechnology. So yeah, for the people in Miami and Fort Lauderdale, you can start doing those services, most likely in November of this year, November of 2021, I will be starting to offer those services there.
Excellent. Okay. So you'll be in that area, but it sounds like you'll be mobile. So yes. That's very cool. And do you see you're heading there? Is there anybody else doing this, or for people that can't get to that area, what do you recommend for them? Great question.
I would say, so neurofeedback is going to be a lot more common right now to find than neurostimulation. So if people live in, a major metropolitan area, really most cities at this point, you can find a psychologist or psychiatrist, sometimes a neurologist to work with, to do neurofeedback. I would recommend for people who are interested in doing any of this neuromodulation, either neurofeedback, neurostimulation, that they look for a couple credentials. So I'm board certified in neurofeedback and in the QEEG brain mapping. So if you find someone with the credentials of BCN, that stands for Board Certification in Neurofeedback, and then QEEG-D, a QEEG diplomat, is the board certification in the brain mapping. So it's super essential, I think, when it comes to like it, if you're going to work on your car, you want to make sure you take it to a mechanic who has the training and experience and expertise. You don't want just any random person working on your car. So in the same way, if you're going to have work done on your brain, I would recommend that you try to find someone with those couple credentials, so you make sure that they really know what they're doing.
Very important. I'm so happy you said that, because yes, I'm not sure everyone can reach you, but they're probably like, wow, I really want to check this out. So thank you for guiding them into a safe way to do that search. And for anybody that's not in this country, do you know what's happening outside of the US as far as other, would you say, researchers or practitioners?
A lot of the research on neurostimulation is actually coming out of Europe. They're way ahead of us in terms of that research. So I'm not exactly sure what actually goes on in those other countries as far as this applied neuroscience stuff. I probably should educate myself more on what's actually happening in the world with this stuff. It's a great question, and one that I can't provide you a real solid answer on. But if people, Google, say, neurofeedback or neurostimulation, and wherever they live in the world, you can definitely see if there's any practitioners around you who use it.
Cool. Okay. No, that's good advice, right? And we're always, it sounds like you're digging deep into what you're doing, and it's nice to expand out and think about that. But in general, yes, the world is changing, and there are some really cool things that are happening. And this neurotechnology is definitely one avenue that I know a lot of people aren't aware of. And I'm happy that you're kind of a pioneer in this, and that you took the time to show us around this world. And I'll be eager to see what people tend to do with it, and get that little tickle in their head if they want to start making some changes.
People may not have heard of this stuff too much right now, but I may be a little biased because I obviously work in the field, but I truly think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see this stuff exploding. You see a gym on every corner, and working out our physical bodies, people know, and eating healthy, we know the importance of that. So I really think that this is the next frontier where brain health and applied neuroscience, this is going to be coming to the masses.
Yeah. So thank you for giving us kind of like a preview into this new realm. I have a feeling you might be correct. It just seems like the way technology is going, it'll be nice that it can help us along the way as we adjust to all these changes. So Toby, thank you so much for taking us here. It was such a pleasure to talk to you.
Denise, it was a pleasure to be on the show, and thank you so much. I had a great time.
Thanks for joining the Passionate Health Advocate Show with your host, Denise DeShetler. Like what you hear? Then subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.